Jonas watched as the creature's entire torso became visible, a lethal dirigible being led toward its new hangar. Jonas brought the AG-1's Lexam nose cone within 5 feet of the female's right eye. The blue-gray pupil was rolled back into the head, the light exposing only a bloodshot white membrane. "Jonas?" Terry's voice crackled over the radio. "I think something's happening with the Meg." "Talk to me, Terry." "The female's pulse is climbing very slowly. It's at 87, now 90. "Jonas, DeMarco here. I've reloaded the harpoon gun, as per Masao's new orders. If your monster wakes up before we enter the lagoon, I'm firing whether it kills the fish or not. Consider yourself warned." Jonas thought about arguing, but changed his mind. DeMarco was right. If the Meg regained consciousness before the Kiku could get her safely in the lagoon, the ship and its entire crew would be in danger. He stared at the creature's open jaws. Coursing through its DNA was 70 million-plus years of instinct. The predator could not think or choose. She could only react, each cell attuned to her environment, every response preconditioned. Nature itself had decided that the species would dominate the oceans, commanding it to perpetually hunt in order to survive. Jonas whispered, "We should have left you alone." "Jonas?" Terry's voice pierced his thought. "Didn't you hear me?" "Sorry, The magnate's bearing down on us." Terry's voice rose. 500 yards and closing fast." "A magnate? But what the hell are you doing now?" wondered Jonas, his mind racing. DeMarco focused his binoculars upon the yacht, his line of sight finally drifting back toward the activity along the stern. 2 men, both supporting a steel drum, balanced their cargo on the transom. "What the hell?" said the engineer. 300 yards, 200, and then DeMarco caught a face. Heller. He refocused on the steel drum and realized, Jonas! DeMarco snatched the mic out from Terry's hand. "Depth charge coming right at you. Get deep." Jonas leaned hard on the joystick, circling right, then rolled the sub beneath the Meg's upper torso. Mac's copter leaped off the frigate's deck. Circling the airship hard to his left, he raced toward the incoming magnate as if leading an air assault on a North Vietnamese patrol boat. Bud looked up, the helicopter appearing out of nowhere, bearing down on a head-on collision course with his yacht. The millionaire screamed, yanking the wheel hard to his left, seconds before the platform supporting the chopper's thermal imager smashed into the magnate's radar antenna, ripping it off of its aluminum base. Debris exploded across the deck, the air raining shrapnel. Reacting as if a grenade had just gone off above their heads, Danielson and Heller dove sideways, abandoning the depth charge. They landed hard on the deck, covering their heads in an attempt to avoid the incoming debris. The maneuver left the 500-pound depth charge balancing precariously on the transom. As the yacht veered hard to the left, the steel drum rolled over the transom, plunging into the ocean. Seawater rushed into the canister's 6 holes, filling the pistol chamber and sinking the bomb. Mac pushed down on the joystick, yelling in the wind, "Mac attack!" A smile fixed upon his face. Boom! The explosion caught the pilot off guard. He yanked desperately on the joystick as the tail of his copter swung out from behind. With a crunch, the landing gear smashed into the upper deck of the magnate, tearing the roof off the luxurious stateroom, shearing the bottom off his helicopter. The airship spun out of control, the blades unable to regain draft. Before Mac could react, the copter slammed sideways into the ocean. At 312 feet, the depth charge's spring had released, thrusting the percussion detonator against the primer. The crude weapon had imploded, then exploded with a flash and subsonic boom. Although the lethal radius of the bomb measured only 25 feet, the resulting shockwave was devastating. The invisible force of current caught the AG-1 broadside, rolling the winged craft over and over again. Jonas pitched hard against the Lexan cone, cracking his head against the hard surface, nearly knocking himself out. On board the Kiku, light bulbs shattered and bodies flew as the ship's fittings loosened with the blast. Captain Barr cried to his crew to seal the engine room, but the roar of the media helicopters drowned his voice. Terry Tanaka knelt on the deck. Her first thoughts were of Jonas. She found the radio transmitter. Jonas, come in, please." Static. "Al, I'm not getting a signal." "Terry." Masao pulled himself up the stairwell, collapsing on the top step. Terry ran to him. "Call the doctor!" she screamed, her hands covered with her father's blood. DeMarco grabbed the microphone to the Kiku's speakers, calling for the ship's physician to report. He failed to notice the Meg's cardiac monitor, the digital display now racing past 100. Jonas waited until the after-effects of the shockwave subsided, then attempted to roll the submersible right side up. The power was dead. He swore to himself, then began rolling hard against the interior, gradually gaining momentum as the sub twisted counterclockwise. As he completed the maneuver, he could feel the natural buoyancy of the sub taking over as it gradually began to rise, tail first. "Terry, come in." The radio, like everything else on the sub, was dead. A glow loomed on Taylor's right, lighting up the interior. Jonas turned to find himself hovering within 3 feet of the female's basketball-sized pupil. The blue-gray eye was open. Blind, it stared directly at Jonas. Bud Harris dragged himself off the polished wooden floor, unsure of what had just taken place. The Magnate was drifting, her twin engines off. He glanced sideways in time to see the helicopter's blades slipping beneath the waves. "Fuck you," he muttered, then pressed the on switch, attempting to restart the engines. Nothing. "Shit. Danielson! Heller! Where the fuck are you guys?" Bud headed out on deck, locating the men standing by the transom. "Well? Is the monster dead?" Danielson and Heller looked at each other. "Gotta be," said Danielson, not sounding very sure of himself. "You don't seem real confident," questioned Bud. "Unfortunately," said Danielson, "we had to let the charge go a little early when that lunatic attacked." "We need to get out of here," said Heller. "Yes, well, boys, that's going to be a bit of a problem," said Bud. "The engines are dead, your damn explosive apparently loosened a connection, and I'm not exactly Mr. Goodwrench." "Crust, you're telling us we're stuck out here with that Meg?" Heller shook his head, his jaws locked tight. "Frank, the monster's dead, trust me," said Danielson. "We'll be watching it float belly up any second now." Heller looked at his former CO. "Dick, it's a fucking shark. It's not going to float. If she's really dead, she'll sink to the bottom." At that moment, they heard a splashing sound to their left. The yacht seemed to drop, and then a hand appeared at the ladder. Mac, dragging himself on board the Magnate. "Beautiful morning, isn't it, assholes?" he said, collapsing on deck. The myriad of boaters anchored outside the Tanaka Lagoon had witnessed the super yacht break from the group to rendezvous with the incoming guest of honor. They had seen the helicopter intercept and attack the vessel, only to end up crashing into the sea as the depth charge had detonated. Now the onlookers grew anxious, wondering if the explosion had killed the creature they had paid good money to see. Almost as one, several dozen of the larger fishing boats grew daring, gradually moving toward the listless Kiku, intent on filming the creature dead or alive. 9 media helicopters were hovering above the Kiku, perpetually shifting positions in their attempt to gain better camera angles. The underwater explosion created a new twist on the story. The networks ordered their helicopter crews to assess whether the megalodon had survived. David Adishek was in the back of the Channel 9 Action Newscopter, straining to see over his cameraman's shoulder. The white glow of the creature was visible, but whether the shark was dead or alive was impossible to determine. The pilot tapped his arm, motioning him to look toward the opposite side of the copter. Racing toward the megalodon was a flotilla of pleasure boats. From the tip of her snout to the edge of her caudal fin, the megalodon's skin contained fine, tooth-like prickles called dermal denticles, literally skin teeth. Sharp and sandpaper-like in texture, the denticles were another in the predator's arsenal of natural weapons. As the female twisted insanely within the cargo net, the dermal denticles began sawing through the rope, slowly slicing it to ribbons. Jonas watched the female shake herself free from her bonds as he desperately checked the sub's fuses. Finally, she turned in his direction, jaw slack, triangular teeth splayed. Desperate, Jonas tried the power switch again. still dead, as the monster propelled itself upward. Bud and Mac had gone below to the magnate's engine room, leaving Danielson and Heller on deck. Frank was leaning across the transom, staring into the green water, when the white mass materialized. "Son of a—" Whoosh! The stern exploded, fiberglass splintering in 1,000 directions. Danielson and Heller fell back onto the tilting deck, rolling toward the water. DeMarco manned the Kiku's harpoon gun, training the barrel on his target. He released the safety as the Meg surfaced. He watched as she swam upside down now along the surface, a river of water passing into her mouth as she exposed her glistening white belly to the world. DeMarco aimed, pulled the trigger. Click. God damn it! The explosion had jammed the gun's inner chamber. The entire crew was on deck now, frantically donning orange life vests. In the pilot house, the ship's physician tended to Masao, now conscious. "He's fractured his skull, Terry," said the doctor. "We need to get him to a hospital as soon as possible." She could hear the swarm of mediacopters hovering above. "Pasquale, get on the radio. Try to get one of those news choppers to land on the Kiku. Tell him we have a serious injury. Doc, stay with my father. I'll be aft." She ran out of the pilot house, making her way to the hangar deck. David Adashek saw her first, waving emphatically on the helipad. "I know that girl," he said. "That's Tanaka's daughter, Captain. Can you land this bird on the Kiku?" "No problem." "Hold it," said the cameraman. "My producer's screaming at me in my earphones to get close-ups of the Meg. He'll have my balls for breakfast if you land on that ship." "Look," said David, "the Meg is attacking the Kiku. All the more reason why we're not landing." "Hey," said the pilot, "I'm getting a distress call from the Kiku. They're requesting we transport an injured man to shore. Radio man says it's Masao Tanaka. Looks serious." "Land the copter," ordered Adashek. The cameraman looked at him with a scowl. "Fuck you." Adashek ripped the camera from the man, holding it out of the pilot's open door. "We land, or I feed this to the Meg." Moments later, the helicopter touched down on the helipad. The megalodon circled madly beneath the Kiku. The ship's exposed metal hull, immersed in seawater, generated galvanic currents, electrical impulses that stimulated the female's ampullae of Lorenzini like fingernails on a chalkboard, driving her to attack. A sudden current twisted the AG-1 around and upwards, giving Jonas an unobstructed view of a scene that sent pangs of fear through his heart. The megalodon plunging her snout into the hull of the Kiku. The collision brought the entire crew to its knees. Metal screamed and a low-pitched moan emanated from below. "Son of a bitch!" swore Captain Barr. "That fucking monster's eating my ship!" "Man the lifeboats! Pilot, get Masao off this boat. We don't need his blood in the water." The pilot of the newscopter looked at Adashek and the cameraman. "One of you guys has to get off if we're taking on wounded." The cameraman looked at Adashek with an evil grin. "Hope you can swim, pal." David felt butterflies in his stomach as he exited the safety of the chopper, allowing the doctor and Terry Tanaka to load Masao on board. He stood on the lopsided deck and watched the copter fly off toward the mainland. "What the hell did you just get yourself into, David?" he asked himself aloud. Crumpled against the port rail of the Magnate, Dick Danielson stood painfully, grabbed Heller beneath his armpits and hoisted him to his feet. "We're sinking." "No shit." Heller looked around. "Where are Harris and Mac?" "Probably dead. If so, they're lucky." "The Zodiac." Heller pointed at the rubberized raft. "Come on." Heller swung over the rail, followed by his former captain. Danielson brought the 65-horsepower outboard whining to life and gunned the throttle. The raft's lightweight bow rose high in the sea, the Zodiac skimming over the waves, accelerating toward land and the pack of oncoming boats. The female shot straight upward out of the Pacific, her open mouth missing the Zodiac, catching it instead on her broad back and launching the rubber raft 15 feet into the air. Heller and Danielson flew like rag dolls into the ocean on either side of the shark. The megalodon's sudden appearance started a chain reaction. Two oncoming fishing boats veered sharply into adjacent vessels, creating two separate pileups.